Okay, colleagues, greetings and welcome back. Hopefully we are live. So, today a bit of a different video. Wanted to do a little bit of an update on the current events, I guess, which is a dangerous thing to do to some extent. But to some extent, I have to confess, I feel that events compel me. So, to some extent, but yeah, okay, just double checking that the sound is working. The live stream is live and public. I feel that I might need to unlist the live stream after I'm done with it, but I'll try to be careful around the precise wording that I use, so that I don't have to end up doing that. So, I guess what I want to do is I just want to talk out loud. Again, some thoughts in my head that I feel need expressing. In a very important respect, I feel what I'm doing right now is maybe oral history. Okay, oral history. You could say Dear Diary, right? Like just trying to make like a snapshot of events, a snapshot of a particular mood that I'm in right now. And immediately I want to ask myself, like, why do I want to do that? Is this going to be a useful video for people to watch? And I'm not sure, but again, I feel, if nothing else, like for myself, I want to preserve this moment in time. And of course, I've been having a lot of private conversations with people recently, but it's like talking like this, even if nobody's going to watch this, talking like this imposes a certain discipline on thought, and actually also discipline on language. You could say also imposes a certain kind of regime of censorship or political correctness. And that may or may not be true. It's hard to say. I mean, obviously, the way I talk to my friends, to my family, even to my students in private conversations when the door is closed is quite different from talking to kind of YouTube, where potentially anybody could be watching. But I would not say that one mode of speech is more or less authentic than another mode of speech, right? So one way or another, at the end of the day, we're always playing a role, this role or that role. We're playing to a particular audience, right? There's a particular set of expectations. Parenthetically, this is going to be a sidetrack. Let me just note very briefly, it's kind of interesting, especially when I talk to, let's say, first-year students, and especially when maybe they're doing like a very heartfelt presentation about, I don't know, existentialist philosophy, or maybe some kind of, philosophers who are recent philosophers whose work borders on literature, right? At some point, you can ask this question, like this sort of this self-reflective experience. Like, ask this question in a classroom, like, what are we doing right now? Having like a philosophy class about teaching a philosophy class, having a discussion about having, like, within a philosophy class, having a discussion about having a discussion in a philosophy class. That's always a very kind of, self-reflective experience, self-reflective enterprise, and also kind of this opportunity, sometimes, rarely I would say, but to some extent an opportunity to maybe take off the mask a little bit and thematize. Take off the mask presupposes that there's something beneath the mask, right? And kind of the existentialist philosophy had this notion that behind the mask of social facade there is the real you, right? And I don't believe that, right? As a Buddhist and as a Lacanian, as a Freudian Lacanian, as a Buddhist and as a post-structuralist, I don't believe that there's anything behind the mask. Right? Behind the mask, there's only a different kind of a mask, right? But still, this idea of thematizing and questioning, this idea of focusing on this notion that we always have a mask on, right? And in an important respect, again, as post-structuralists would say that, in an important respect, it's not I who speak a language, but language speaks through me, right? this creates a different kind of a discussion, a different kind of an experience, maybe a slightly more self-conscious, self-reflective kind of experience, along those lines. And that's very valuable to me in all sorts of ways. But at the same time, again, I do have to kind of always going back to this project, to this motto, to the central idea of my philosophical project, which is mechanistic as opposed to teleological worldview. Like in the mechanistic worldview, there is no freedom, there's no God, there are no purposes, there are no souls. Human beings don't have souls, right? And this is a very kind of idea which is resonant with many strands of Buddhism, right? Thinking of Nagarjuna maybe, or Vasubandhu, again, this idea of momentary existence of consciousness, right? That, I inherit something from the past, and I look like a person who existed in a similar body a moment ago, but is there any genuine ontological continuity? Well, David Hume would question that in this question, this problem of self-identity, of identity of the self, raised by David Hume, but also raised by the Buddhist philosophers. And again, ultimately talking about all this as a way to thematize that, again, there's no reason for me to believe the word me here is a problematic word, right? This language generation device that speaks right now, there's no reason to attribute some kind of substantiality, like a soul to it, right? But anyway, so it's always kind of interesting, right, to get lost in these long-winded introductions, right? Reminded of how, getting lost in a sidetrack of a sidetrack of a sidetrack. Reminded of how allegedly Martin Heidegger did his seminars on Hegel's phenomenology of spirit, and every year he managed to get through less and less to lesser and lesser portion of the text. So much so that sort of the last year he taught the seminar, allegedly, I've never really double-checked the story, but allegedly he never managed to get past the introduction, right? So, here I am, getting lost in the introduction to what I want to talk about, right? But there's a reason for it, I guess, and there are many reasons. This is my style on the one hand, but I suppose another reason is that the thoughts that I have in my head right now are kind of, heavy, complicated thoughts, and maybe this is just a way of procrastinating and not getting to the gist. So let me just make a side note and just start from afar. First of all, today is April 2nd, 2nd of April, and it's snowing. it's amazing. Somehow, hopefully you're watching this on YouTube. Hopefully YouTube hasn't taken down my channel yet or something like that, which is a distinct possibility in recent times. But anyways, there should be a picture. It's a picture I've taken outside my house. And it's snowing in April, which is not typical for this time of year at all. And this kind of, immediately I tend to not talk about my biography, but, I will. So talking about today, and this is also something I tend to not do, right? So it has been my explicit position that to speak of recent events, even though I teach social political philosophy, moral social political philosophy, I actually make a conscious effort to not talk about current events, right? As I like to joke, and this is less of a joke and it's mostly true, I want to say that the most recent event I'm prepared to talk about, the most recent news I'm prepared to discuss is the outcome of the Peloponnesian War. Anything that has happened after that is far too recent, right? Far too recent. Not enough time has passed for us to be able to reflect on it calmly. Of course, it's a bit of a joke, but I hope you can see. I hope you can see what I mean there. But still, so potentially I have a lot of things I want to share, and it's like this acronym TMI, too much information. I tend, sometimes in personal conversations, I tend to actually, engage in this TMI a bit, more than I would otherwise want to. I have this inclination, and when I'm recording, class, I don't know, videos for online, like for this public consumption, I try to limit that, but this might be, we'll see, this might be a different video. So let me kind of immediately go into this different kind of mode, much more personal mode. So I'm in Moscow right now. That's already a very dangerous statement in April 22 to say that you're in Moscow. Wow, that requires some explanation, right? Now, there's presumably no secret in that. I would imagine most people who are subscribed to my channel, most people who watch me know me through my teaching in Moscow. I have been teaching in Moscow for the past 10 years, and there's no reason to conceal that because it's more or less public information. And in fact, the reason why I've created this channel is because I was going to record a lecture course for Coursera. And I made this channel, well, partly because I wanted to share, share the knowledge, share the experience. I mean, I love teaching. This is kind of my, well, I could use the word vocation, although who knows what that word means. Like, I always found it immensely enjoyable to teach and to talk. I never liked reading or writing very much, but I always enjoyed talking and listening, which is incidentally why I prefer audiobooks. Like, I mean, for example, and this is kind of my personal recommendation. Maybe you are like this as well. Like, it's like I've quote unquote read Leviathan many times, Hobbes's Leviathan, but I cannot imagine how many times I've read and reread Hobbes's Leviathan. But mostly it's like I listen to audiobooks because that's just like I'm an auditory person. I like live speech, right? I could insert some kind of a joke or a reference to Socrates here, who presumably also did not like writing and always preferred conversations, live conversations. I could try to excuse my habits by referring to Socrates here. But let me try to go back on track. So I've always enjoyed teaching tremendously, and this is why I made the channel, because it's like, for me, this was like a continuity of what I was doing in classroom. Kind of my immediate impulse to do the channel was twofold. First is that, like when I speak in classroom, especially at some point, kind of over the years of teaching, I found, like in general, I tend to be quite self-critical, right? I don't think of myself as particularly like, I don't know. It's like I don't want to congratulate myself on being particularly outstanding at what I do. However, some of my classes I hoped were worthwhile for students to listen to. And for one reason or another, maybe a student misses my class, or maybe they are in a different group or in a different course, or they want to come back. So kind of this was like a matter of course for me to make my recordings available, especially because I've always tried to record my own stuff and listen to it to see what could have been done better, what could have been improved. And at some point, re-listening to my recorded material, I thought, well, this maybe is borderline publishable, right? I mean, students do come to my class one way or another. They have to listen to me, so they might as well listen to me on YouTube if that's more convenient. And many students have told me that it is more convenient. And I was planning to kind of record and upload this for a very long time. I could do a video at some point because, actually the technical aspect is not particularly easy. Like right now, for example, I'm speaking into a Sennheiser wireless microphone, and it took me a while to actually figure out exactly what is the best way to organize this kind of, like from a technical standpoint, how to do this, how to make, these kinds of recordings available. But again, the immediate impulse, well, I mean, like I've always wanted to share, but the immediate impulse, what made me actually start the channel, was that I've had this arrangement with the university to record the lecture courses in history of political philosophy or something like that. I mean, they gave me carte blanche to name the course whatever I wanted. I mean, from the standpoint of the administration, I was just recording a philosophy course in English. But because I teach in the international relations department, it made sense to do this, to make this a course about social and political philosophy to help the students. Because I mean, again, like I have an interest in all of philosophy, and I decided to specialize in social and political philosophy, well, because I found it probably most worthwhile. In many ways, like I'm prepared to defend this position. I feel that, in some sense, well, no, I mean in a very crucial sense. As somebody who teaches philosophy of science, I do feel that, you see, kind of human individuality, human thought, individual thought, is linguistically constituted. Language is social, and societies are historical, right? And so this kind of man is by nature a political animal, zoon politikon. So political philosophy, or if you want, social and political philosophy, trying to thematize sort of what human beings are. Like human beings by nature are first and foremost political. So what I'm trying to say is that political philosophy has this crucial relation to us as thinking individuals. So in an important sense, I do think that political philosophy is in some sense the highest branch of knowledge. And again, I'm prepared to defend that from a position like as somebody who teaches philosophy of science. Like within the whole body of what human beings call knowledge, political philosophy plays this crucial, pivotal role, because everything that we are as thinking and talking beings is political through and through. Because again, thinking is linguistic, and language is social, and society is historical, political, right? So this kind of this idea, which could be found in Wittgenstein or in Heidegger, but I would imagine especially in Wittgenstein, or maybe in Thomas Kuhn, this notion, or actually in Emil Durkheim, that the truths of logic or truths of mathematics, like the basic truths of science, have like at the root something like an element of political consensus about them. So in this sense, kind of, I feel that there's a certain primacy of political philosophy vis-a-vis all other branches of knowledge. I would say kind of, it's like philosophy is the highest discipline, and within philosophy, political philosophy is the highest discipline. And I feel that sort of if you read Plato's Corpus, my impression is that Plato has similar idea or same idea. I could refer to Plato's Republic, by way of justifying that. So anyway, I was recording this, trying to go back on track. So I was going to record this course for Coursera, which I did, which was uploaded to Coursera, which was available on Coursera since September of last year, so September 2021. And now, actually, all of it is available on YouTube right now, unlisted, and much of it is available, is searchable, available as listed, right? But if you want to check out the entire course, you can. I'm pretty sure that the link is in the description or in the comments somewhere. I'll pin it after the video. In fact, I pin the link to this Coursera playlist after all my recent videos, so you can click on any of them and you'll find the playlist with all the lectures arranged. There's actually a couple of segments which I had to cut from Coursera because they did not fit, just time-wise, from the standpoint of time. I think I should include them as well, but it'll take some time for me to do that. Now, as you know, unfortunately, lamentably, a lot of tragic things are happening in the world every day. And this is not the most tragic, okay? But, it makes me sad that Coursera has deleted the course. Now, I don't want to get judgmental. I don't want to say whether this was the right decision or the wrong decision. The decision was made, and I understand why it was made. I'm not going to comment on whether I agree with that or not, right? But there you have it. The course has been deleted. And so, I want to talk about that also. But let me back up a moment and let me say something else. Why am I recording this right now? First of all, I have to tell you, personally, I feel very tired, and I honestly feel quite exhausted. And I did not necessarily want to start this live stream right now. However, there are rumors, again, I am in Moscow right now, and there are rumors going on that YouTube may be blocked very soon, maybe next week, maybe the day after tomorrow. I've heard this, date being circulated. Is this going to happen? It's hard to say, but Facebook and Twitter and Instagram have already been blocked. So, YouTube might be blocked as well. Now, of course, there are VPNs. So, most people are gonna, if they want to, will have some form of access. But VPNs are difficult and slow. And what I'm doing, like right now, live stream, this might be, I don't want to say impossible, but like technically too hard for me to organize. Like I'm not sure I'll be able to organize it efficiently because this issues of latency, right? I'm not sure I'll be able to stream like this, right? So I thought that I should do this recording. Now, why? What's going on? So let me go back a step. So what is this? This is a diary or maybe oral history. And so when I say oral history, I mean something very particular. So I'm giving you kind of my subjective perception of the situation. And yes, I have my boots on the ground, I have my feet on the ground in Moscow, but like we should not imagine that this gives me or anybody else any kind of objective perception of the situation, right? Because what you see, what anybody sees is like always information from their own particular perspective, from within their own particular paradigm. And I'm perfectly well aware of the limitations of my not just my vision, but like of my standpoint. Like I don't see Moscow in its entirety. I haven't spoken to everybody in Moscow, right? So like, take everything I say with a grain of salt, and I should be repeating that over and over and over again. Because like I'm doing this not to tell you the quote-unquote truth about what goes on right now. That's not my point. I want to record this so that I remember this moment in time. And I may end up unlisting this video, but I'm sure I'll come back to it and listen to it in the future. Because this is an important moment in my life. And I want to have a snapshot of it. And again, obviously, I am talking to YouTube at large. So this imposes certain limitations on my speech, but still, I mean, kind of, if I talk to my brother, that imposes different kinds of limitations on my speech or different kind of biases or predispositions on my speech. Like if I try to talk like this to my brother, he'd be bored to death and he would, he would not even listen to me if I was going on like this, right? So this gives me a certain kind of, opportunity to speak, more freely in some ways, less freely in other ways, whatever. So let me say a couple of methodological things. So what's going on right now, officially, according to the Russian government, is called special military operation. And it's like nobody in Russia is supposed to call it anything else on penalty. And it's like, I could comment on that, but let me just leave that hanging in the air. So it's like, there are certain constraints to what I can say. And I'm still, as of right now, I'm still formally teaching. I still have students, I still have colleagues. So I don't necessarily want to, say things which potentially might incriminate people. And let me maybe take another step to the side and make a general comment, because like I don't want to leave kind of this issue hanging in the air. I like in most of my videos, in many of my videos, I mention or maybe this is sometimes front and center. I talk about how I think of myself as a Marxist, and non-dogmatic Marxist, like skeptic first, Marxist second, right? But, well, actually, you know what? I do, oh yeah, Nikolai is here. Nikolai is saying greetings from Vienna. Yeah, greetings, Nikolai. Yeah, so a bit of a different video. Happy to see you on this interesting day. So yeah, so like I think of myself as a Marxist, but kind of I have my three rules. I'm a skeptic first, so I'm a skeptical Marxist. I'm a fallibilist first, so I'm a fallibilist Marxist, right? And kind of, apart from Marx, there's at least Buddha and Foucault or maybe Nietzsche, philosophers who inform my thinking. So I'm maybe, aspiring to be a Buddhist Marxist or maybe a Nietzschean Marxist. Skeptical Buddhist, Nietzschean Marxist, something like that. And kind of in general, kind of the core of my approach is this idea of trying to see complexity where other people see simplicity. Yeah. And so, Yeah, special file sharing operation. Yeah, sure. No, actually, maybe I'll end up interacting with people writing in the chat more today because I feel like doing that. So anyway, so again, as a Marxist, again, as a skeptical Marxist, but Marxist nonetheless, we have a certain way of looking at things, right? There are people and then there are governments. There are people and then there are governments, right? And so, like, on the eve of the First World War, the Marxist sentiment in general was this idea of, socialism or barbarism, and that in general, the working people, let's say of Germany and France, should not fight against each other, but should join hands and overthrow, capitalist oppressors. So in an important respect, like, the media right now and the public discourse very much is about taking sides. And, we, the Marxists, I feel, we're hated by both sides because we don't take sides. We are against both sides, which is a dangerous position to be in. And I've actually recorded an hour-long video on like Marxism and war, if you want kind of my take on this. And incidentally, let me also mention David Harvey, who's maybe the most important commentator on Marx, like among the people who are alive today. David Harvey actually did a video on like his take on the situation in Ukraine, and I think I would tend to agree with most of what he says. Again, David Harvey, you probably know David Harvey, the author, among other things, of a companion to Marx's Das Kapital. So maybe to say a couple more words, like, I'm not, it's like, I teach philosophy, right? So, and again, I prefer to talk about the Peloponnesian War. Maybe, again, First World War. And, when we talk about First World War, we appreciate the complexity behind the causes. We appreciate the complexity behind the events, right? And we say that, certain events may serve as triggers, right? But in general, there's this certain structural thing going on, and there are different ways of analyzing the First World War. And again, like, I don't think that any one particular way is true, but they're all illuminating to various degrees. And again, there's this famous realist perspective, with regard to the situation in Ukraine. John Mearsheimer, and we teach John Mearsheimer in our department, again, and have been teaching him for many years, right? So Mearsheimer has his own take, realist, so quote-unquote realist take, right? Marxists have a different approach, right, to both the First World War and the conflict right now, right? Kind of structuralist approaches. But the idea is that there's a lot of nuance and a lot of complexity, and kind of in general, this idea of kind of blaming and demonizing particular actors is in general counterproductive, right? Kind of, I feel that within the kind of the mechanistic versus teleological approach, in mechanistic approach, we don't believe in evil, right? And this is an idea which goes back to Socrates and to the Buddha, right? That there's no such thing as evil. The world may be the abyss of the purposeless chaos of matter, der Schlund des zwecklosen Chaos der Materie, but we don't attribute evil to people. People can be misguided, people can be, suffering, at war with themselves or something like that. Human nature might be less than perfectly cooperative, and human beings, quote unquote, might be bad, like bad for a particular purpose. Like, for example, I'm a bad electrician, or let's say I'm a bad piano player, right? So in this sense, people can be bad. But evil, that's a category we try not to use. We think that, along with witchcraft, that's a category that's outdated and needs to, get out of the public discourse. And, among the academia, there are people who are experts on First World War, Second World War. There are also experts on, the events in Ukraine right now. And I'm not one of them. So in an important sense, I don't want to comment on this, right? And I had a friend who's American, who lives in Poland right now, and in a conversation he told me, like, anybody who doesn't have a PhD in post-Soviet studies, anybody who does not have a PhD in post-Soviet studies has no business commenting what goes on right now. And I do not have, and I agree with him. I do not have a PhD in post-Soviet studies, so I don't want to comment. Now, immediately, full disclosure, again, kind of best argument on the other side. This is a conservative position. Sometimes refusing to take a stance, that's a conservative position. Right? And when you look at, let's say, what Socrates is doing in ancient Athens, engaging in these, skeptical dialogues with particular individuals, that could also be seen as socially conservative. Partly because, again, Socrates is mostly talking to members of the ruling class, of the, wealthy merchants or aristocrats, because they have the time to talk to him, right? And likewise, I am talking to students who don't have to worry about paying the rent next month, usually, right? And so, there might be a certain bias endemic in that. But that's kind of. Do I want to say more about this? I'm not sure. Well, again, let me say one more word. So, I am kind of mentioning this idea of oral history, and I might I'm not sure how much energy I have to keep this monologue going. I might get to that because it's like, again, I'm teaching in a university. I go there, regularly, almost daily, and I can tell you what the atmosphere is like in the university from the standpoint of what I see, right? Which is, again, a limited perspective. It's it's going to be an account which is very much limited by the position in which I find myself. But I can speak about that, right? And the short version is that, I feel that the university, the whole university, is very depressed right now, at the very least. But also, let me say a couple other things, right? So it's like, when you talk to people, everybody says, well, I don't want to say everybody, like a vast majority of people who are willing to talk will begin by saying, and this includes me, will begin by saying that we all have relatives in Ukraine. And that's true, because to some extent, to be a Russian-speaking, ethnically Slavic in post-Soviet space just means to have relatives in Ukraine. That's just basically how demography works. Everybody has relatives in Ukraine, and I have relatives in Ukraine. I also have relatives in Belarus, right? And I am in Moscow right now. So, what am I driving at? Well, I could try to give you my view, but in an important respect, I'm not sure if my point of view is worth saying out loud, because it's not objective, it's not the full story. It's, again, oral history at best, because we all get certain kind of snapshots, right? There's a particular snapshot that I see in Moscow. There's a particular snapshot that my friends share with me in Moscow. And there are particular snapshots that are coming out of my friends in Belarus, and I have actually more friends in Belarus in Belarus than I have in Russia, especially than I have in Moscow, right? And I also do have relatives in Ukraine who are sending us messages and pictures, and that's also kind of a snapshot. And of course, basic humanity requires me to say that what goes on right now, humanly speaking, is a tragedy, and it's very sad. Now, also, and this is what I began my video on. Marx's take on war with, is that, in general, we Marxists, I feel that our response to this kind of conflict, which is, again, tragic and a lot of people are suffering, is to remind ourselves that people are suffering all the time, that this is what neoliberal capitalist order, imperialist order is based on, right? And this is kind of a point of connection between Marxism and realism, right? Society is based on violence and exploitation. Marxists agree with this, realists agree with this. Marx says this, but also among the realists, Rousseau and Hobbes and Machiavelli and Thucydides is going to say the same thing, that society is based on force and fraud and violence, and law is ultimately based on lawlessness, right? And there's this primordial act of violence and usurpation at the establishment of every society, right? And much more so, right? Marxists are going to talk about how the war is going on all the time. That's just part of the neoliberal order, post-colonial neoliberal order. There are wars going on all the time. There are people suffering all the time. It's not on the news all the time, but it's true. And again, Marxists also would say that there's not necessarily such a huge difference between one country invading another country and people suffering within the country. Again, there were, it's now I have to, think how much do I want to talk about this since I'm talking about this publicly. But there were protests in Belarus, not long ago, right? And what is the difference? You see, armed people, armed police or armed military is shooting at peaceful protesters. This was happening in Belarus recently. Now it's happening in Ukraine, right? What is the essential difference, right? Or you can think about workers somewhere in China or maybe in Africa. Or in India, who are forced to work, and if they don't, bad things are going to happen to them. The state is going to deploy violence against them, right? And your state deploys violence against you, or your neighboring state deploys violence against you. What is the essential difference, right? And of course, it's people bring and I mean, David Harvey does this too, right? So talking about imperialist wars of aggression, and then there's Libya, there's Lebanon, there's Syria, and there's Iraq, right? So just Google Iraq civilian casualties. The war has been going on and off in various stages for about 30 years. Again, I'm not an expert, so double check everything I say. So for about, along this time frame of about 30 years, we're looking at maybe ballpark, because it's very hard to estimate, maybe something on the order of 1 million of civilian casualties, maybe more. And we're looking at maybe 500,000 children dead, right? And it's like, when we say this, like, it's important to remember, this is not just some random event, and it's not like one kind of violence justifies another kind of violence. No. The Marxist point is that violence is endemic to the capitalist system. Violence is endemic to the capitalist imperialist system. Like, it's an integral part of that, right? And so when people say, oh, like, one act of violence does not justify another act of violence, well, I'm trying to choose my words carefully. No, it doesn't justify, but it may cause, right? A cause is not necessarily a justification, but it's like, it would be kind of strange, and like Hegel likes to use this word abstract. Hegel likes to talk about things being abstract. Abstract, like taking something in the abstract, is like one-sided, partial, incomplete, right? So somebody like John Locke or Immanuel Kant, according to Hegel, have a very abstract view of society, right? So Hegel and Kant imagine that there's this kind of universal standard of justice, and everybody adheres to it. And if there's a wrongdoing, this wrongdoing gets, rectified. And that's just not the world we live in, says Hegel. And not just Hegel. Like, I, as a Marxist, I would agree with that statement. And so, like, very often, and I suppose, I hope I mentioned this in my Marx video, but I should repeat this now because I feel it's very important, right? One of the first insights of me doing kind of social political philosophy was the realization that very often in the conflict, both sides can legitimately claim to be in the right. And this is maybe kind of this Aristotelian viewpoint that, which is anti-Kantian Aristotelian viewpoint, right? That kind of, you can have like a clash of standards of justice. And kind of the example I tried to give, because I thought that it was kind of remote enough and it's okay to touch. I'm not sure if it's politically correct to touch these days. But the example I always used to give was kind of Irish Catholics versus British Protestants, right? That again, both sides have legitimate grievances against each other, which go back generations. And kind of this conflict cannot be simply resolved within this kind of Lockean or Kantian issue. Let's just find isolated events and let's prosecute the wrongdoings, right? Like, you need a different way of looking at society. And I mean, somebody like David Hume or Edmund Burke is going to say, forget about justice. If you want peace, forget about justice. If you want peace, let's just move past this kind of Lockean idea of kind of vengeful justice rectifying all the grievances, and let's look for a constructive way forward based on common interest, right? And in an important respect, again, that's the basic approach of Marxists, right? And again, to go back to this maybe slightly less political example right now of the First World War, again, Marxist idea is that German workers and French workers should unite against the common oppressor, which is the international bourgeoisie. Workers of the world unite. That's kind of the general viewpoint. But, it's like, how do you apply that logic to the situation on the ground when the socialist parties, at the end of the day, do not support this internationalism, but support the nationalism and the militarism of their governments and go to war? How do you work with that? I mean, Rosa Luxemburg has this famous slogan, socialism or barbarism, right? But how do you act on it is not a very simple question to resolve. And I finished my discussion of Marx on war, which was the last live stream or something I did. I finished by talking about this kind of private solution, anti-political solution to the problem of politics. And I do talk quite a bit about that in my lectures on Coursera. Anti-political solution to the problem of politics in somebody like Socrates and Rousseau and Foucault, right? This anti-political solution, individual project, individual solution to the problem of politics, right? And that's always kind of a possibility, right? As society is going to hell, you just try to, I don't know, take care of yourself, take care of your family, continue your own individual enterprise. And I try, sorry, I lost my train of thought. Yeah, so in general, kind of, I feel that, well, I mean, what was I trying to say? I was trying to say that the events of the last month were very challenging. Now, they were much more challenging for some people, A lot of people, lost their livelihoods, lost their lives, right? And who am I to complain? In some sense, this is first world problems. And I recognize that. But at the same time, it's like, again, as a matter of this oral history, I just want to kind of register this, not to claim to be, like particular, to have particular, not to make any special claims for myself, not to claim that I have suffered particularly, in particular, but just to say, recognizing that many people suffer much more than I do. By the way, I'm talking to you right now through this Sennheiser wireless microphone. Let me take this moment to remind myself and everybody else that most likely the cobalt in the battery was mined by children in Congo who will die from the horrible exposure, right? So when we talk about, again, force and violence and coercion, the neoliberal order is based on force and violence and coercion. And, certain kinds of suffering children we get shown on television every day, but other kinds of suffering children, like the children in Congo, or let's say people who recycle trash in China, right? We don't get shown those, right? No, mainstream media doesn't put this front and center. Even though this is part of what goes on right now, an integral part of the functioning of the, again, neoliberal, post-colonial capitalist world order, right? And that's an important question that needs to be kind of kept in mind. And in an important respect, yeah, it is the media that decides what we're going to think about. Again, Sean Carroll had this interview with a woman, I'll never remember her name, but they were talking, I think, about surveillance, and again, this is Sean Carroll, right? His Mindscape podcast, and he was talking about the things which are visible and things which are invisible. And I was thinking about this in terms of, Marxist notions of ideology. And I think they mentioned this idea that you have webcams, like you have webcams, for example, like in Japan in Shibuya Crossing, right? Or so let's say New York Metropolitan Square, or what have you, like you understand, like you have these webcams in beautiful public places. But for some reason, you don't have webcams in slaughterhouses, where let's say pigs or sheep or cows are being slaughtered, right? And you don't have webcams in, like trash recycling facilities, even though that's integral to the way our economy functions, right? Like most of the things I have around me in this room, right, are gonna end up in a landfill somewhere, right? So it's not like this is some kind of random event. And so the media, in an important respect, is telling us what to focus on, right? And this doesn't have to be intentional. This doesn't have to be a conspiracy theory. But it's unpleasant to talk about these things. And this is kind of a big topic of conversation as to how individual psychology connects to the global economic order. So Marxists would say that there's the economic base. The economic base produces the ideological superstructure. And then the ideological superstructure is instantiated in the minds of particular individuals who have their own kind of psychological propensities. And there are reasons why, it's more pleasant to think about, I don't know, the achievements of humanity and how we're going to go to space and colonize Moon and Mars. And it's not pleasant to think about, slaughterhouses and trash recycling facilities or sweatshops. Again, I'm talking right now to you through a microphone. How many people had to sweat, suffer blood, and bleed, and maybe even die, so that I can talk into this microphone? And again, the clothing I'm wearing. Who has sewn this clothing, and under what conditions? Again, it is in an important respect the capitalist media that, like let's say Al Jazeera. Al Jazeera will show you some pictures on its front web page and not other pictures, even though like kind of both events, both acts of violence and exploitation are part of the functioning of neoliberal order. Now, am I trying to make some kind of a simple, oversimplified conclusion? No. In general, again, the whole point of doing philosophy is to see complexity where other people see simplicity, right? Again, I have my 16 lectures on YouTube, and we Marxists, we have this project of enlightenment, culminating in somebody like Jürgen Habermas, this ideal of the free and equal discussion, this ideal of civil society, this ideal of free development of each is a condition for the free development of all. We have these ideals, and Gramsci will talk about, Antonio Gramsci will talk about, war of position, organic intellectuals. There's this project. I mean, is it, am I optimistic about this project? Well, unfortunately, no, not really, but we do have a roadmap. And, time will tell. Time will tell to what extent we're able to stick to this roadmap or not. Yeah. So, I'm not sure if I kind of finished my thought, but let me maybe go back and maybe I promised to do a little bit of oral history, and I want to get to that, but let me see. Again, Nikolai is writing. Know a bunch of Russians and Ukrainians. Yeah. Russians go around malls and supermarkets, compare prices. Yeah, I can say something about that as well. Well, let me actually talk about that. Well, first of all, those of you who are watching my videos will, if you care to do a little bit of research on me, which is not hard to do, but I am more or less a public figure, being a university teacher, right? So I've been for the past 10 years, 11 years, since 2011, I've been teaching in Moscow in a double degree program, and this is a joint program between Higher School of Economics. It's I don't like talking about these things, but it's not like it's a secret. Like at the beginning of every video from Coursera, which I upload to my YouTube channel, you can see the logo of our university. So it's like anybody who wants to double check, I'm not revealing any secrets. Anybody who wants to double check this can double check this immediately, right? So this was a double degrees program between Higher School of Economics in Moscow and University of London. And actually, we have three double degrees programs: economics, international relations, and computer science. So these were the three programs, the three joint programs between the two universities. And I've been teaching in all three, and I've been teaching philosophy in all three programs. And, it was a lot of fun. And what's happening right now is that, especially our programs, are in the process of imploding. Because it's I'm not sure how much I want to say, because it's, might be dangerous for me or for my colleagues. But again, first of all, everybody's shocked, everybody's depressed. Many of the teachers have left, especially teachers who are from abroad, who have, citizenships elsewhere, have simply left. I've had a teacher, I'm not going to tell you the name, I've had a teacher who basically left mid-class, in the middle of the seminar, just took his things and left. And kind of that was, to some extent, just to give you an impression of the situation. Why did people leave? Well, because people were afraid that there's going to be extreme measures, and maybe the window of opportunity to leave Russia is closing. And I've spent a lot of time thinking about how, in general, how before crisis breaks out, on the eve of the First World War, or on the eve of the Second World War, what could individuals do? Because again, as a Marxist, as a cosmopolitan Marxist, I'm not necessarily very sympathetic to nationalist ideologies. I don't necessarily believe in fighting and dying for your country, which might be a very subversive thing to say. I remind you people, that Socrates was executed basically on the charges of treason against the Athenian state. So when I begin my course, kind of about, with the sophists, and talking about how, there's this intrinsically politically treacherous and religiously impious element to philosophy, I mean it quite seriously, right? But sort of, I've spent quite a lot of time thinking about what could people do differently. I don't know, Theodor Adorno is somebody who was very important for me as a thinker, and I was kind of reflecting a lot about the circumstances under which he left Germany. And there was also a window of opportunity, and it was closing, and he was able to get out. And his friend and colleague, Walter Benjamin, was not so lucky, right? And it's I could continue the story, and it's all sorts of things that could be said, and I'm not necessarily an expert, but you understand what I'm talking about in general. And I was kind of applying the same logic to myself. I'm still in Moscow for many reasons, partly because packing up and leaving, I'm not sure what exactly that would accomplish, and secondly, like in general, this is not my style. Again, as a philosopher, as a Buddhist, I have my singing bowl, I have my meditation, I have my Buddhist community in Moscow. Most people I know are staying put, even though it's hard to predict what the situation is going to look like, and especially on February 24th. I would imagine a lot of people woke up in the morning, they were deeply shocked by what they saw. And not complete, like, I mean this very seriously, I do not want to undermine the suffering of people who lost their livelihoods and maybe, even died. But, you have to understand that kind of, for a lot of people who had something to lose, like, for example, I was looking at my bank account. And again, as a philosopher, I'm not supposed to talk about this, but, and this is maybe a little bit of a TMI, but on the other hand, like, I want to show my human side. Yes, this is my human, vulnerable, imperfect side. I want to call myself a Buddhist at some point, but I'm not a Buddhist right now. I'm aspiring to be a Buddhist. Because if I was a Buddhist, I would not have cared about my bank account. But I did, right? And you open your bank account and you just, you ask yourself this question: what do I see on screen? Is this kind of just numbers? Or is there something real behind this, right? And again, being a philosopher, you're not supposed to be materialistic, but, if you have family obligations, if you have relatives you need to take care of, right? Like if you are prepared to become a Buddhist and just resign yourself from the world, that's a particular path you can take, and that's a path I flirt with a lot in my head, but I'm not there yet. And kind of at this stage in my life, I'm not sure if this is a mindful position. I'm not sure if I should be ashamed or change my position. But like right now, I have relatives to take care of, right? And so this was, if nothing else, at least like a question of personal responsibility, of my responsibility before my relatives. And kind of, again, I do not, like, this is first world problems. Like, for many people, like, I'm talking about having a bank account, having something to lose. The vast majority of people alive on planet Earth, as a Marxist, I have to remind myself, have nothing to lose. And also, kind of incidentally, maybe this is a self-conscious moment for all of us, to just take a pause right now, because if you are listening to this on YouTube, you are lucky enough, safe enough, happy enough to be able to afford to watch YouTube on some form of a device. The majority of people, more than 50% of Earth's population, do not have this luxury, right? And that's something to keep in mind, right? Again, is there some kind of a simplistic conclusion that I'm trying to make? No. By the way, the reason why I always bring up this question of conclusions is because especially when I was a student, I've always had this feeling, or I often have this feeling, that kind of the teacher that was saying something had some sort of a simplistic conclusion, but they just did not want to say it out loud. And kind of, for me, genuinely, kind of engaging in philosophy is engaging in this open-ended enterprise where we're not sure what the conclusion is. And again, like for Socrates, most of his dialogues that Plato records, right, end with an aporia, kind of, I know that I know nothing. And I feel that's a very important kind of position to take. And kind of, when I teach my philosophy of science course, I'm painfully aware of this notion that kind of, on the one hand, I feel that, like, in today's world, there's a need, like, an individual needs to be basically literate in everything. Like, you need to know at least a little bit in terms of principles about chemistry, about physics, about medicine, about the way society works. That's what like, you need to have a basic literacy. But at the same time, and this is kind of accusation of Foucault that Michel Foucault has leveled against Jean-Paul Sartre, accusation against universal intellectuals. Yes, maybe you can have basic literacy in all the various disciplines, but you cannot claim to be an expert in everything, right? And in an important respect, to be a philosopher is to purposefully be an expert on nothing, right? Like, I know that I know nothing. That's what I specialize in. I specialize in knowing nothing in particular and seeing the limitations of human knowledge, right? So that's just to kind of alleviate the concerns that some people might have that I have some kind of a obvious hidden agenda. Kind of, no, I don't have an obvious hidden agenda. In fact, again, kind of it's quite the opposite. So let me, again, by way of this oral history, let me just give you a little bit of a snapshot. Mm, the snapshot that I want to talk about is that I feel it's like a lot of people, I'm sure, in Russia just completely don't care about what goes on right now. They have their lives, they have the problems, maybe they watch official television. Maybe, a lot of people, I would imagine, just cannot afford to care about the situation, cannot afford to be informed about the situation. You see, like being informed is a privilege, right? You need, in today's world, very often you just, at least at the very least, need to basically speak English and be, basically literate to go online and to know what sources to use and how to double check them, right? That's not necessarily a very, very easy thing to do, right? It's a luxury that one needs to be able to afford. If you're a working person, much of the time you don't have the skills and don't have the time and don't have the energy to engage to be able to inform yourself, right? So that's kind of immediately, and it's like when people talk about agency, do the Ukrainian people have agency? Do the Belarusian people have agency? Do the Russian people have agency, right? To a very large extent, that's not necessarily, an easily answerable question. I want to go off on a tangent. So I have a lot of friends in Belarus. And did you know Belarus is supposed to be this horrible authoritarian country? And by some measures, it seems to be, right? It's like, again, this kind of, there are these indices that get published, this certain kind of presumably reliable research which ranks countries according to their kind of openness and transparency and accountability of the government, and Belarus is not supposed to be very high there. But Belarus, as far as I remember, is supposed to have some twice the GDP per capita of Ukraine. And again, what is the conclusion I'm trying to draw here? Well, the conclusion I'm trying to draw is that I don't know. There are kind of it's like some of my friends from the West have this impression that Belarus is a horrible concentration camp. And what I'm trying to say is that, it's not heaven on earth in any shape, matter, or form. It has its problems, but it's not a concentration camp, okay? But also I want to say, many people I know in the West, or let's say in the US, if you are a regular citizen, and again, take everything I say with a grain of salt. I'm not an expert in all this. I'm trying to be an expert in Thucydides or in Hobbes. I'm an expert in reading of particular texts. I'm not an expert on things on the ground. So you shouldn't listen to this for some kind of authoritative advice. Again, the reason I'm talking about this, the reason I'm recording this is because this is oral history. This shows you my biased, limited perspective. And in this moment of time, I feel that it's worth sharing this very much profane view of somebody who's completely a non-expert, just a very biased, very prejudiced view of things. But anyway, let me continue. So if you are a regular citizen, let's say in the US, how much transparency and accountability does the government have vis-a-vis you, right? How much can you hold your government accountable? To what extent can you hold your government accountable and transparent to you? How much can you actually influence the actions of your government? Now, those of you who have taken courses in political philosophy or political science with me, we have this kind of the view of three or maybe four phases of power. Robert Dow, Becker Barrett's, Stephen Luke's, and maybe phase number 4, Michel Foucault. How much, in terms of the phases of power, to what extent is America actually democratic? And the answer is maybe not very much. And likewise, so it's many countries I feel, and this is I think what I've been saying in my video about Marx on war, this idea that countries, in this Wallersteinian terms, countries of the core can afford to give concessions to their population. So it's not like they're particularly democratic or accountable, but they rule with this kind of reluctant consent of the population because the population gets concessions from the government, and so they kind of, they have something to lose. Remember Marx, workers have nothing to lose but their chains. Let's give them something to lose so that they don't protest because, if you protest, maybe life will get better, maybe it won't get better, right? So likewise, Russia or Belarus, yes, there are certain measures, objective. Well, I'm not sure if the word objective is right here, but certainly there's kind of peer-reviewed, international published research which will tell you about these problems with authoritarianism and corruption and unaccountability in countries like Russia and Belarus. But at the same time, there is some transparency, some accountability. For example, I don't know, I go to what's the right phrase? Like there are public services, like let's say I lost my passport, and I had to go to the local police to file a complaint that I lost my passport, and I had to go through the procedure of getting a passport again. Actually, well, the details are not important. So like you go through this process, or maybe there's something wrong with your health, and you go into a public clinic, right? And so you receive public, state-provided, socialized healthcare, right? And there is, what I'm trying to say is that there is a measure of transparency and accountability in the way that those services are provided. So in this sense, to say that kind of this illusion of Russia or Belarus being completely authoritarian kind of is wrong-headed on the one hand. On the other hand, of course, when people talk especially about polls and polling and talk about kind of the support of the population for the government and to what extent kind of there's this narrative of trying to blame the people, first of all, again, within the mechanistic approach, we try to never blame people for anything. Again, we don't believe on evil. We try to ask for causes. We don't ask for quote-unquote blames, right? We don't play this blame game. But still, within the mainstream media, there's often this idea of trying to blame the people for the actions of the government. Again, I've spent quite a bit of time in Belarus, and I'm not an expert, but kind of I feel if the university implodes, and I feel that there's a very high chance that our programs will implode by September, and I will be unemployed. And this is one of the things I'm kind of thinking of doing, maybe just to travel a little bit, and actually go to maybe Belarus and just to record a little bit of oral history, like engage in a little bit of, like in sociological terms, this verstehen, understanding sociology, these qualitative methods, just talk to people. I'm not sure if this is gonna, if this is gonna be publishable in any shape, matter, or form, but like I feel the need right now to talk to people, like in depth, to have these conversations and to see where people's minds are at, right? And this is actually what I've been engaged in mostly in the past month. And to some extent, I'm talking right now to YouTube because I wanna distill at least something of the insights that I got from talking to people, which is not much, not many insights, but still I want to thematize that and talk about that a little bit. But anyway, let me go back to Belarus and just finish a little bit. So it's like, I don't know a single person in Belarus who wholeheartedly supports Lukashenko. I don't know a single person there like that. And many of my friends in Belarus, because it's like, well, I don't want to get too biographical, but like many of the people I know in Belarus are like completely working class as you can imagine, like like bus drivers. Okay, this is the kind of people, not only those kinds of people, but also those kinds of people, and even they don't support the government. But like, what can you do? What can you do? What is the avenue for change? And when we talk about this kind of neoliberal governmentality, in an important respect, I feel that kind of the government in Belarus is unaccountable, but also the government in the US is unaccountable, or maybe the government in Britain is unaccountable. And maybe there's a difference between the way that they're unaccountable, but it's not a totally different thing, right? And whereas there's this perception, there's this kind of bias, maybe neoliberal bias or something like that, mainstream media bias, mainstream Western media bias, this kind of colonial narrative that somehow these are barbaric countries sort of falling outside of the normal course of affairs. As Locke would say, kind of degenerate and noxious creatures, which is, again, I'm trying to push back against that. I'm sorry for kind of jumping all over the place and not necessarily making a lot of sense, but kind of there's a bunch of thoughts I want to get out. There's another thought I also want to mention is that kind of in terms of in general kind of Europe vis-a-vis Belarus and Europe vis-a-vis Russia in terms of social mobility, like again, I grew up in Russia in the 90s. I try to not think, and maybe I will sit down and try to systematize my experiences, but like in general, my childhood, I try not to think about that. I try not to remember what I saw on TV and what I saw in the streets, right? And I'm not sure, this story I tell all the time, and just for the record, I'll repeat it here. So it's like, kind of maybe the most vivid memory I have from my childhood is how orphans, like in the middle of winter, and it's funny because we're in April, but like outside my window it's snowing. Orphans in the middle of winter, when I say orphans, there's this Russian phrase, беспризорники. I never speak Russian on YouTube. Maybe I should read some Mayakovsky at some point or something like that, just for fun. Uh, but that's also part of my legacy of growing up in Moscow in the 90s. Kind of speaking Russian is traumatic for me. I'm trying to forget the 90s and forget Russian. English has become for me the first language, the language of thought and the language of speech, and also my professional language of teaching. Anyway, sorry. I mean, I would not be able to give this whole discussion in Russian. No way. But again, so it's like, sorry, go back a step. So my most vivid memory from the 90s is how, in the middle of winter, so I just was walking from school to my house, which was actually not very far. And I mean, I'm sure there must be some phrases in English, but in Russian you'd say "sprizorniki," like street kids, attacked me, punched me in the face. Well, not too hard, but like punched me in the face and took my gloves. I didn't have like particularly posh gloves or anything. Like our family was not. I mean, our family was struggling, as well as everybody else was struggling, But it's like. I know a lot of people who were struggling more than my family did, but it's like it was not necessarily very fun times. And so again, like this idea of orphans attacking you in the street and stealing your gloves, and not particularly expensive gloves at that. And it's like, first of all, I just want to leave that there, because like I feel like as a picture, as a memory, that's very symbolic, and it is the first kind of story that's comes to mind. And Freudians will make a lot of this. Like, why does this story come to mind and not some other story? Because a lot of things happened in the 90s with me, right? And also, why am I selecting this story to tell and not some other story? So Freudians, feel free to unleash your powers of critique on me. But also, kind of, I want to also kind of emphasize, I guess, kind of two things. First is that, do I blame those orphans? No. You see, this is kind of, in some sense, the roots of my teleological worldview. Sort of not teleological, but of course anti-teleological worldview. This is the roots of my anti-teleological, my mechanistic worldview. I had to understand those kids. And like even back in the day, I don't remember feeling particular resentment against them. Because like I was quite aware that I was much luckier than they were, right? In life. And like in general, I should not be mad at them. Like if anything, I feel that, well, I certainly felt a lot of fear towards them, but maybe also, I don't want to say pity because that sounds condescending, but maybe compassion. And like in general, ever since I was a child, I was very, like the easiest way to bring me to tears is actually to show me children suffering. Maybe because I saw too much of that when I was a kid myself. Again, I don't want to overstretch, but kind of, sorry, I'm not making much sense, but let me move on to a separate topic, but let me leave that there. At some point, maybe I'll sit down, maybe I'll write a book about all this. But I need to think about it, because like right now in my head, it's all extremely chaotic. But also kind of related to that, like in the 90s, kind of the word Russian, русское, российское, that was not a good word. Because if something was Russian, if something was made in Russia, it meant that it was bad. Like good things were imported into Russia. Russia was not a wealthy country. Like if you had a Russian car, that meant you had a bad car. If you had a Russian television, like a Russian TV set, that meant you had a bad TV set. If you had like a pen made in Russia, it meant it was a bad pen, or in like bad furniture, Russian furniture. So I have this ingrained in my brain. It was kind of par for the course, somebody growing up in Russia. And again, take everything I say with a grain of salt. This is oral history. I'm not saying it's true in any shape, matter, or form. This is oral history from a particular perspective, the way I remember my childhood, the way I remember this going on, right? And by contrast, we all wanted to go to Europe. Like everybody I knew wanted to go to Europe. And something people I think don't realize is that it was first and foremost the Europeans who imposed, visa regimes on us, right? The borders are closed, right? So when people are talking right now about how, let's say, Belarus or maybe Russia are these closed authoritarian societies, in an important respect, like I don't want to play the blame game. I do not want to play the blame game. The situation is complex, but to an extent, an element in the situation was a conscious policy of the countries of the first world to block themselves off, right? To not allow immigration. And again, in some sense, it stands to reason. You understand why this happens. But again, as a Marxist, you have to say these words out loud. As a Marxist, you have to say these words out loud. You have countries of the core, of the Western First World core, and then you have the countries of the periphery. And the countries of the core try to restrict the access. Like, they put these border checkpoints, like nobody's allowed, like you can't get a visa. And it's like, in general, I've spent quite a bit of time in the West, in the First World West, but far less time than I wanted to, because it was always a hassle to go there and was never easy, right? And kind of this kind of idea of integration, well, I could try to continue this thought, but I just wanted to kind of make a note. Of course, right now, who knows what the situation is going to come down to, right? And I have to say, in general, it's very sad because, again, I've been teaching in Moscow now for 10 years. And when I came to the university, HSC, was a very kind of open, well, at least it felt that the university was very open to Western academics. And we had a lot of Western academics. Like, sometimes people talk to me about my Russian colleagues, and I respond jokingly, I don't have Russian colleagues. I don't speak Russian very well. Most of my colleagues in HSC were Westerners, British, Americans, people from other places as well, India maybe, and they left. They were leaving, and the process began in 2014, after the the previous rounds, the previous round of geopolitical tensions. Well, actually, before that, there was another, like, British Council. Do you know what's British Council? British Council is this wonderful organization. I cannot comment anything. I cannot tell you anything about British Council, except that they had an excellent library in Moscow. Wonderful place. They were giving lectures, and they also administered exams. They like allowed people to take international exams in Moscow. Like, I have no idea, I cannot comment politically or sociologically, but from the standpoint of my first-person experience, it was always a wonderful place to be. And there was some kind of diplomatic scandal, and they were expelled, right? And so there was this kind of what's that phrase? Like, developing situation. There was this tendency. There was this trend how Western academia withdrew or was pushed out, or probably some combination of both. And a lot of people left in 2014. And there was a crisis in the economy, and many people left for political reasons, many people left for economic reasons, right? And actually, to a very large extent, I realize this when people talk about this kind of, protectionism, and kind of, you take, there's an economic term I'm thinking about, and I can't think of that. Like, when you cut off the imported good, but you produce it domestically, like domestic production. In an important respect, I keep saying about how I'm this domestic production, because I was never supposed to be the kind of lecturer that I became in HSC. I think I only got my lecturing position because all of those English-speaking, British and American PhDs left, especially after the 2014 crisis, political and economic crisis, right? And HSC, our university, has become a much sadder place because of that. It used to be much more vibrant, much more international, right? And there was kind of many more opportunities to interact with not just Western, but with global academics. And it was wonderful. It was beautiful. It was like excellent memories and excellent opportunities. And they were all shrinking. And like right now, and that's kind of always like a very interesting thing to think about, like in terms of these sanctions. I don't want to comment like in a judgmental fashion, but one thing that the sanctions do, I feel, is that they are destroying. Destroy is a very strong word, but I think I mean it. They are very, very much undermining, they are undermining the enclaves of Russian society that were kind of globalized. So again, take our programs, for example. So again, this was a double degrees program between HSC and the University of London. So I keep talking a lot about the University of London. And so in some capacity, I think I was the official instructor for the University of London courses here in Moscow. I went through some, some more or less formal procedure of appointment by representatives of the University of London back in the day. And so, like, because we were a joint program, all of our syllabi were British syllabi from the University of London. So we were teaching according to the British syllabi, and all the teaching was in English. And right now, the three programs in which I teach are severely undermined. And it's hard to say, are they going to even continue, and in what capacity, come September? And what kind of people are going to be teaching in them, and what kind of people are going to be studying in them? Because like right now, there were problems, and these problems were growing in the past. But right now, they do not seem to be particularly viable. They might survive, but like you understand, in a shape which is like a shell of its former self. And again, there are questions like, was this about the sanctions? Was this the right thing to do? Was this the wrong thing to do? I don't want to get into this discussion right now. I'm just telling you on the ground, right? And also, when I talk to students, like to many students, my question is, are you going to leave? And many students are planning, and many teachers are planning to leave. But some teachers cannot afford to leave because it's difficult, and they have, their houses here, they have connections here, like the whole life is here, right? But also, many of the students are like looking at me helplessly, and they say, look, I'm at the mercy of my parents, and like I don't have any other options, so of course I'm going to stay. And again, is there some kind of simplistic conclusion I want to make from this? No. You see, like, the point of me recording this right now is because I want to make this snapshot in time and come back to it, maybe a year out from now, or maybe 2 years or 5 years from now. Come back to this point in time and just look at this. Because again, I mentioned this about Russia in the 90s. And I was young in the 90s. But my older colleagues told me these stories about how, I had, one of the courses I took on Heidegger in Russia. The teacher began with this following story. He said, well, Heidegger asks this question, why is there something rather than nothing? Why is there something rather than nothing? And he said, well, in the 90s, this question had a very different connotation. And he says, like, when I was reading Heidegger, this is my older colleague speaking, when he was reading Heidegger in the 90s, and he was looking outside the window, he saw a tram, right? Public transport. And he realized, this was common knowledge, that kind of the tram driver was not paid their salary for about 6 months maybe. And not necessarily, was expecting to get paid anytime soon, right? But still, the trams kept going. And so he had this question, like, why is there something rather than nothing? Why? Why do the trams keep going? And to a very large extent, there are some students who are simply at the mercy of the parents and have to keep doing this, right? One way or another. But like, in a lot of students' eyes, I see this desperation, this radical uncertainty about the future. And this idea, like, why is there something rather than nothing? Why are we still having classes, right? Why are we still having classes? Why do the classes keep going? If there's like radical uncertainty about the future, why should I prepare for my mock exams, midterm exams next week, if I'm not sure if our university is going to survive until September, right? This is the kind of, and it's a very ripe time for doing the thinking. And let me just make a comment as a Marxist. Let me say something that I don't hear a lot of people saying, is that, of course, again, there's this issue of neoliberal governmentality, right? Michel Foucault likes to talk about this. Kind of this repressive individualization. That, again, you have this carceral individualization where we're born as individuals, kind of we're made into individuals by a certain kind of neoliberal order. We're kind of segregated, put into our own cells and observed, right? And so people are supposed to feel as individuals, but also as competitors. And so one thing that we don't have is, again, this German word, Gemeinschaft, community. We don't have community. We don't have collective intentionality. We do not have like collective action. And this is something that is very sorely lacking in the university. A lot of people are depressed, but there's no collective action. Students do not protest collectively. Teachers do not protest collectively. Because, and again, it's like I don't think that this is necessarily unique to Russia. I feel that this is the way the neoliberal system works. It may be worse in Russia, but I feel it's true, not just in Russia, but across the board, but just to varying extents. I mean, do you have labor unions? Do you have trade unions? A lot in the West, in the countries of the first world. Well, it's like I've heard recently in the news there were some struggles in America, in the US, about Amazon workers trying to unionize. It's difficult. And by the way, we don't have a trade union of teachers, of people who teach in HSC. There's absolutely nothing like collective intentionality or unionization, right? And it's like the students have no collective intentionality. They have no capacity to protest in tandem. And I feel like in general, there could be this possibility of students stepping up and saying, we oppose the situation that goes on right now because our future is being destroyed in front of our very eyes. And to a large extent, I feel that that's true, right? Because the economy maybe will recover, I don't know, geopolitically there may be some kind of a solution. Who knows? But the academia is severely undermined. The academia is severely undermined, and I do not think that the academia will recover. And again, as far as I can tell from my own perspective, the academia, our university, has not recovered from the 2014 crisis. Like, it has never recovered. The brilliant professors left, and they never came back. And by the way, again, the colleagues that I had, most of the people. Yes, like more than half the people, Russian-born, Russian citizens, who I thought of as my friends and my colleagues, most of them have left before 2022, right? So like before this year, like they have left 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago. Most of them have already left for Germany, for the US. Some for Netherlands, some for Britain, right? So this is kind of a general trend. Like, in an important sense, I kind of felt like one of the last people staying behind. Maybe because, I'm this crazy philosopher guy. I'm just, reading my Plato and I don't care very much about things. So, that's a bit of an observation. So, but I was talking about this lack of collective action. And like people are individually afraid. And like there's this general understanding again, like this is what I feel Hegel talks about when Hegel says that in civil society you have this war of all against all in civil society, right? In bürgerliche Gesellschaft, bourgeois association, like in the market, think of Marx, alienation of men from men. That in the market we're all competitors, and so students intrinsically, instinctively have this feeling: the first student to protest is going to get expelled. And I'm going to get their discount. I'm going to take their place in the rating. Like, I'm going to get the diploma that they will not get. Like, I will get ahead. I'm not saying that this is any kind of a conscious consideration. I'm not trying to portray students as crass and materialistic in this sense. But there's this kind of general lack of collective intentionality. And among the teachers, I feel that, much of the same, applies. And many teachers who can afford to leave have already left or will leave. But a lot of teachers, probably most, cannot afford to leave. And they're desperately afraid because in this, failing economy, and Russia obviously is going on, is in for a crisis. For a lot of them, like, getting right now expelled from the university is like, well, it's not a very nice prospect, right? Ooh, okay. So, again, I'm sorry for being slightly chaotic and kind of, sometimes breaking in mid-sentence, but I'm sure there's a million other things I want to mention and I want to talk about, but let me take a pause and let me see what's in the chat. I see. Oh yeah. Okay. I see some people joining in. Yeah. Okay. So Nikolai is asking, my colleague. Another teacher who left in mid-seminar, basically mid-seminar, they were waiting for airline tickets. They got airline tickets, and the airline tickets were basically for that day. It was very difficult to get. This was I would imagine. I forget exactly when. This was maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. And so it was very hard to get tickets out of Moscow for any kind of price. And so they saw an airline ticket, somebody canceled or something like that, a reservation, and they immediately booked the ticket and just left mid-seminar. Yeah, Buddhist bank account. Yeah. Well, again, I kept saying this a lot in the past, that kind of I feel that my teaching and my Buddhism is pulling me in two very different directions. And once I become like completely embrace the Buddhist path, I'll probably stop teaching. Um, Pipa is saying that they never knew I was in Moscow and hope things are okay in these uncertain times. Yeah, thank you, Pipa. I'm trying my best to stay sane. Yeah. So incidentally, that's kind of like I feel that philosophy, in some sense, first of all, philosophy thrives in times of crisis. There are certain kind of questions that you can ask. And there's a certain kinds of conversations that you can have in times of crisis that are usually impossible. Like right now, I can talk like existential topics, bring up deep philosophical existential topics with everybody. Basically, any random person in the street is willing to talk about these deep questions of meaning of life and existence because all of a sudden, this is at the forefront of everybody's mind. And very often, the kind of person I am, it's very boring for me, or sometimes I have to confess and apologize. Often it's boring for me to talk to some of my acquaintances or friends or family. But these days, and I shouldn't say this gleefully, but all of a sudden it's much easier to talk to people, have deep, engaging conversations. And I feel that there's a certain kind of responsibility on my part to not let this moment slip by, because I feel that this might be a learning experience. That again this phrase. A drug with no side effects, a tool with no blood on it. And does that exist? We're not sure, but we hope. We hope that learning, enlightenment, Buddhist enlightenment is like that. Be a bodhisattva. And is this experience going to help me become more enlightened? I hope. That's the hope. We have to be careful, be skeptics first, but we hope. Everybody wanted to go to Europe to settle, just to visit, to work. Well, again, talking about Russia in the 90s is a very complicated topic. And again, it's like you see, these are just fragmentary memories from my childhood. And these memories are not systematic. And again, I try to not make them systematic because I try to not think about them, right? So I had this general, there was this general impression among my family or among the people I knew, among my classmates, there was this general impression that life in Russia was very bad and very poor, and if you could somehow emigrate to the West, Europe or America, life would immediately and automatically be much better for you. Was this true? Probably not, but this was a widely held stereotype. Also, I have to say that, it's like, again, talking to some of my friends, I feel that kind of my school, especially my classmates, my school was particularly bad. Like many of my classmates went to schools which were much better, like in terms of, socioeconomic status and like general quality of teaching. Like in my school, I remember like this general impression that, again, the world is going to hell, and like everything that we learn in school is just completely useless. Like knowing how to fight, being able to protect yourself with your fists, that's useful in life. But like being able to, solve math problems, like, is that going to help you earn money? That was the immediate question. And again, it's like, probably horrifying, I guess, to remember and to listen to and to bring up. But that's the kind of environment I was growing up in. And again, I'm sorry. You see, like, I feel that the responsible thing to do would be for me to maybe sit down, talk maybe more to my friends, to my family, and sit down and maybe write this on a piece of paper, because again, like, these memories are fragmentary and these are bad memories, and I'm trying, and this may be very one-sided. Varya is writing, bad pens and cars, but very best ballet. Maybe Varya. I have no idea. It's like ballet is not my specialization. I think maybe there was this general impression, that Russia had a lot of very skilled, very talented people. Excellent, first-rate mathematicians, physicists, musicians, or maybe even ballet dancers or sportsmen. But how do you say sportsman, sportswoman? I'm not sure what's the right word you use. Like people, you understand, right? But in terms of consumer goods, some famous Russian YouTuber went to Georgia. Yeah, I think I even understand who you're talking about. In case you can visit for a few days. Oh, thank you, Nikolai. No, well, right now, for the foreseeable future, I think I'm planning to stay. It's like I've been talking to some of my colleagues, and actually, the general impression is the following: is that, and this is something maybe I tend to agree with, is that we as teachers have a responsibility to students. Again, many of my students are like 15, 16 years of age. These are students who have just finished high school and have enrolled into the university, and they are young, impressionable, and they are in need of help in this difficult time. And so, like in general, I started talking about how philosophy thrives in times of crisis, but also philosophy, with Socrates, with Buddha, is supposed to like be philosophy be to the soul what medicine is to the body. So we have, as philosophers, I feel that we have a responsibility to our students to help them through these difficult times. So my teaching ends in April. So up until the end of April, I'm not moving anywhere, because I feel it's my responsibility towards my students to stick by them and to help them as much as I can. I do not want to deny, and this is not a pleasant thing to say out loud, and I would kind of, I'm saying this in spite of myself. In this past month, I've had like, what's the right phrase? Like psychologically, I was struggling. Some of the days I just woke up in the morning and I don't want to make any kind of special claim for myself to have suffered more than other people. No, that's not what I'm saying. But like full disclosure, to a very large, and this is kind of this YouTuber effect, or Facebook effect, or maybe Instagram effect. Like you see people kind of in their best shape. Like I mean, right now I'm recording this live stream. I'm not recording, but streaming this live stream, right? Because I feel okay today. I feel like recording a live stream. Last weekend I did not feel like that. Okay, and this is for me a point of humility. I want to become a Buddhist one day, but I am not right now. I want to become like a proper philosopher one day, but I'm not right now. I'm an aspiring philosopher. And so I'm trying to help my students, but also I feel that I need to help myself to be able to help my students. I need to keep myself kind of composed, focused, self-conscious, self-aware, not in the grip of emotion. And again, it's not pleasant for me to disclose this, but it's important. I talk about this skepticism, fallibilism, empiricism, but especially fallibilism. This idea that I'm painfully aware, I understand that I may have biases, I may be wrong, but also I'm a weak person. I'm not superhuman. I'm not immune to human emotions, and sometimes I get enraged or depressed, and that's ideally that should not be part of my job description. I should be above that, and I should strive as much as possible. Whew. Yeah, confusing times make serious philosophers. I hope so. We'll see if we come out the other end stronger. Whatever doesn't kill us makes us stronger. Like this kind of Nietzschean insight, which I feel is a very bourgeois insight. Kind of, if you are bourgeois, if you can afford to live through the times of crisis, you'll either become stronger, or at least if bad things happen to you, maybe you'll write a book about it. Working class unions are very far away from decision making by a philosopher king. Well, yeah. Respectfully, Nikolai, I want to kind of, to some extent, athletes. Yeah, thank you. Respectfully, Nikolai, I think I would sort of disagree, because kind of I have this kind of Marxist reading of Plato and Platonic reading of Marx, because I feel, because Plato doesn't actually describe how philosopher kings and queens, because Plato believes in at least in a certain kind of gender equality. Yeah, he doesn't actually explain how exactly they deliberate, right? And so, like, my vision of communism, my kind of Marxist vision of communism, is like, all of your society are philosopher kings and queens. Again, this idea, Aristotelian idea of taking turns ruling and being ruled, or ruling and being ruled at the same time. Kind of this, some sort of a direct democratic procedure, which is basically, I don't want to say, like Marx describes something like this when he talks about the Paris Commune. Now, the Paris Commune is an isolated, very precarious social experiment in the middle of a war. So one should take it very much with a grain of salt. But there is this kind of quasi-anarchist element in Marx. So it's like, I don't want to, again, just to kind of sum this up, I'm trying to have a Platonic reading of Marx and a Marxist reading of Plato. Whew. So, Zal writes, which philosophers can you advise to better understand politics and a place for human in the world? Well, um, let me, well, it's like, I have, sorry, when the university gave me the opportunity, right, to record a lecture course, I had my 16 lectures, and they are here on YouTube. I should add the playlist to the description, right? Maybe I could do this right now. If I could just recommend one philosopher, I would do them in the first lecture. I feel that kind of a good understanding of the history of Western philosophy is needed, and kind of the 16 lectures is like as few as I could manage to fit my course in. So this is a bit of a sidetrack of this might not be the most satisfying answer, but kind of this is the best thing I could do. Like for me again, I try. I have this on my slide. Buddha, Marx, and let's say Foucault, I feel are the three philosophers. If you could read and understand Foucault, I feel Foucault would be excellent. But in order to understand Foucault, you need to have a general background. Marx is also an excellent candidate, but I feel that in order to really understand and appreciate Marx, you need at least to have a basic grasp of Hegel and basic grasp of Greek philosophy. So it's hard to say. Plato is a good place to start, but then so many people misread Plato completely. So it's like in general, I'm afraid like my advice cannot be simple advice. Just read this or that philosopher. Thinking is hard. Thinking is complicated. And again, within this critique, again, talk about Buddha, Marx, and Foucault. Buddha, Marx, and Foucault. All three are social critics. Socrates is also a social critic. Plato is a social critic. Society misleads us. The first task of education is to unlearn. As Pierre Bourdieu says, philosophy, or sociology in his case, is a martial art, is an art of self-defense. So, and it takes, you have to work against the narrative. So I don't think that there's like one single philosopher I can recommend. I mean, you can start from whichever philosopher, again, I think. Buddha, excellent starting point. Plato, excellent. Marx, excellent. Nietzsche, excellent. Foucault, excellent. But it's not enough. And any philosopher can be misinterpreted. Again, to go back to this phrase, which I think a lot about. A drug with no side effects. A tool with no blood on it. Right? No philosopher is like that. No single philosopher is like that. Any philosopher can be misinterpreted, can be turned upside down, can be used for nefarious, deleterious, counterproductive purposes. So like the 16 lectures is as few as I could do, as little as I could do. Kind of less than that I think is insufficient. Nikolai is asking, am I disappointed with anybody disappointed with anybody I know personally? Disappointed. That's a very strong word. Well, I mean, it's a difficult question. I'm sorry. I don't want to. I don't want to necessarily just fall silent. We all want to be better people. Nikolai, I have to tell you, I'm certainly disappointed with myself. Disappointed that, again, I woke up on the 24th, and like in general, I spent a lot of time recording Coursera, and already after that, I was quite tired, and I've had quite a tense, intensive teaching experience. So I was already feeling tired, and actually I woke up on the 24th of February. I woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I was laying in bed, and worrying, which is not what a philosopher is supposed to do, not what a Buddhist is supposed to do. Like instead of standing up, doing a little bit of yoga, meditating, I was just laying there in bed worrying. And I've had worries, and these were simple, stupid worries, just general life things getting in the way. And then at 7 o'clock, I suddenly saw the news, and I was astonished. I don't think, it's like, this was not entirely unpredictable. I teach in the international relations department, and people were talking about those possibilities. But it's just, I don't think anybody reasonably expected something like this to happen. People thought maybe something on a much smaller scale, but not this. We were all hoping. And I mean, again, like I'm in general as a philosopher, I tend to just focus more on ancient texts. I'm trying to teach. I'm trying to develop a new course right now, which is this Introduction to Political Philosophy, and I have a bit of drafts here and there on my YouTube channel, trying to kind of work towards that. So I was very busy with my new course, and I'm trying to read for that new course, trying to read Machiavelli and Clausewitz and Carl Schmitt, and these are all kind of relatively new philosophers for me. So I was kind of I did not follow the news actually very much. And just, and I completely, I'm not even subscribed to news channels. I try to never watch the news because at the end of the day, like I do not want kind of news websites to determine what I'm thinking about in the morning. I try to have this autonomy to myself. I wake up and I decide what to think about. And I watch a lot of YouTube, almost all of it educational. I watch a lot of educational YouTube, and just completely randomly, I had one channel post about this at 7 o'clock, and this is how I found out. And this was, well, sorry. I mean, I could talk more about this, but maybe some other time. Nikolai is asking, how was the news reported? Well, I got it from a US-based educational channel, so the way that the US mainstream media reported it. Yeah. I mean, it's like I'm not in any of this stuff, so I'm not sure how much think about from some particular about situation in Moscow from a person who is currently in Moscow. Feel free to ask me, but it's like, again, I'm a crazy person who doesn't speak Russian very much, who doesn't watch the news very much, and who just spends time. Like my experience is very biased, so you shouldn't necessarily make a lot of conclusions based on what I say. Oh yeah, let me comment on the most crass, the most banal, the most stupid thing ever. Like in terms of prices, in the stores around me, like supermarkets around me, it's about 30% increase, approximately 30% increase in price across the board, I would say, more or less. So well, I mean, some things got much more expensive, like appliances or cars, or so I hear, because it's like I don't shop for appliances very much. But I hear that those kinds of prices sometimes jumped maybe about 100%, so like a twofold increase. But kind of the things that I buy, and well, being a yoga person, I try to follow like a vegan/vegetarian light diet, not super strict, but something along those lines. The kinds of things that I eat, it's approximately 30% increase. Spengler. So Beso is asking, place for Spengler in my new course. Spengler is a complicated name for me because, well, I mean, I know who Spengler is and I have like a basic understanding, but it's like, let me give you the following response. So we all have our biases. My bias is very much a University of London bias. So I'm actually, like my teaching is based on the syllabi of the University of London and on the textbooks from the University of London. None of our syllabi and none of the textbooks that I read ever mention Spengler. So like, as far as I'm concerned, it's like he's a non-thinker, non-figure for us. Maybe that's a mistake, and maybe I should look into Spengler. But you see, like, life is too short. I don't have enough time. Like, if I see a reference or if I get a strong recommendation, maybe I'll look into Spengler. But like, so far, there are other philosophers on my list. And again, when I mentioned Clausewitz and Carl Schmitt and some other people like Machiavelli, this is also driven by the University of London. I mean, it's not like exclusively like I'm not only doing this because they told us to include them. Kind of, I also have interest in all of those thinkers. And Carl Schmitt is a very kind of controversial, very complicated philosopher. But like as a Marxist, I have to be interested in Carl Schmitt because there's this great reception of Schmitt on the left, by people like Giorgio Agamben, or maybe Slavoj Žižek, or maybe people like Hart and Negri. So like I should know more about Schmitt, and more than I do right now. Whew. Okay, so I feel like I'm, so okay, the more people are joining, and I feel like I'm running out of steam. I've been going for almost 2 hours now. Anyway, people, is there anything else important that I wanted to mention? The weather is absolutely crazy because like the picture you see on screen right now, this is what this is a picture I took today. And it's April 2nd. Like that's not what weather is supposed to look like in Moscow this time of year. Anyway, colleagues, I feel that we should be probably wrapping up. People are discussing Spengler, but I'm not sure I'll be able to comment on Spengler. I feel like I should be probably wrapping up. Was this useful? Was this stimulating? I'm not sure. There's a lot of confusion, but we're all trying to think through the situation. Let's hope that this challenge will be a learning experience for all of us. Anyway, colleagues, thank you so very much, everybody, for showing up and for asking questions. And special thanks to Nikolai and Varya, who are always often reacting to the videos. It's always very nice to see live reactions that some alive human beings are actually watching the stuff I put up. If you have any questions or comments or whatever, feel free to keep in touch through YouTube or in any other means. I do have to warn everybody. There's a distinct possibility that YouTube is going to be blocked in Russia. So I'm not sure if I'll be able to do another live stream. But I will be able to continue posting one way or another. But we'll find a way. We'll find a way. There are many ways to go around all this stuff. So let's hope we'll be able to keep in touch. I sincerely hope that this was at least to some extent stimulating. Again, I'm sure that this was a bit too chaotic and there was a lot of confusion in what I was talking about, partly because the situation is confusing. Let's hope. I talk these days a lot to my students in this metaphorical terms that in times of crisis people like to pray to gods. We philosophers, we have our gods, right? So maybe Athena, who's the patron god of the city of Athens, yeah. Under whose aegis Athenian philosophy flourished. And then there's Apollo, the god of prophecy, right? The god with whom Socrates had a special relationship. So people pray to their gods. We philosophers, we pray to Athena and to Apollo. That we pray that things go back to normal and that human suffering could be minimized across the board. That's what we pray for. But in general, to go back to Buddha. Maybe let's hope that we're able to maintain self-consciousness and composure. Be composed, be focused, be self-conscious, be reflective. Right? That's what we're aspiring towards, and in an important respect, that's a daily struggle against the abyss of the purposeless chaos of matter. Anyway, colleagues, once again, thank you very much for showing up. Feel free to keep in touch. And until next time, stay safe and take care. Let's do our usual outro.